our value chains. In terms of some of the recovery strategies I'll be looking at is investing in healthcare. We need to invest in healthcare. I know healthcare was not one of the areas that was prioritized in negotiation in the Africa Continental Free Trade area, but I think it's now important the AU Secretariat, the CFTA Secretariat, prioritize healthcare, because and then we've known that we don't know when this will end. Our people are dying. So what we need to do is to ensure that we prioritize healthcare. Additionally, we need to look at investing, we need to look at governments giving stimulus packages. A lot of people have lost their jobs. A lot of people have lost their livelihoods. It's important that governments support the private sector to be able to build up. I am aware that the World Bank has given Africa a total of around US $14 billion as a safety net package. So it's important as African leaders, we don't look at this money to just be able to develop other areas. We need to focus on our weaknesses, and our weaknesses for now is on healthcare. Because if we do not have our people, then we cannot be able to develop. I have quite a number of points, but maybe I can be able to leave it for somebody else to take it up. But I think Kenneth, you can come back to me, and I can be able to even give you the challenges and others. I don't want to hold a lot of space. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Rose. I think you just, there's a lot of unpacking to do, to be honest. There are a lot of things you touched on. And to be honest, like I always say, once we have discussions around Africa and, growing the economy and some of the challenges and opportunities, we can spend the whole day and the whole night talking about it, knowing fully well that we all have our passions and everyone really wants the continent to succeed. Well, you made some very good points. So I think there is that whole thing about private sector collaboration, the need for more like a multi-stakeholder approach, bringing the private sector with the government and then tying it into entrepreneurship. So that kind of like just slides in perfectly to my question for Michael. So Michael, I know you're a successful person playing in the agri sector, and I know you've done a lot of work in terms of global trade as well. Opinion, how much role do you think the private sector, like building entrepreneurs, especially with more focus on agriculture, how much role do you think they should play? How much should they be involved in terms of moving after? Michael, can you hear me?
Right. Yeah, I can hear you. I suggest, because I think the bandwidth is quite heavy for people on video, it might be useful if we switch off our video so that everyone can hear us. Thank you very much again thanks for having me on the webinar. First and foremost, I must say that the opportunities definitely itself for every challenge that we face, and that's just the reality. Businessmen see opportunities in challenges, and for success this period, especially post COVID-19, both the private and the public sector must play where everybody was heavily dependent. So I think there will be a global thing trade post-COVID-19, given the key Southeast Asia for its products or great opportunities for Africa. Definitely the more cost leader when it comes to both labor and factors of production. It's also the reality that, of course, given that we occupy the southern hemisphere, Africa has competitive advantage when it comes to arable land, when it comes to potentially raw materials. But even more importantly, I think most important export Africa will be sending to the rest of the world in the next 5 to 10 years would not be then what is below our feet, but what is above our neck. That, I mean, human resources, the human capital. And Africa is a continent of over 1 billion people, and also has home to several large English-speaking countries, including Nigeria, the third largest English-speaking country in the world, as well as Kenya and South Africa. And so the opportunity for these English-speaking, especially English-speaking countries, especially since English is the language of business in the world, to export human capital is enormous. And that's, I think, is something that Africa will also benefit from. Now, coming to my own space, agriculture, I mean, I see that definitely being an area where we have a competitive advantage as a continent, but we've not really strengthened that advantage over the years, such that Africa didn't become the net food importer rather than the net food exporter. In order to solve the problems, it will require enormous private sector capital risk taking, as well as support from the public sector. But the risk taking that the private businessman need to take in order to build big and large agribusiness, the likes of Grifols or Midlands or any of the big players like Cargill on this continent exists. We have a continent that is in natural resources that is very diverse. We also have a continent that has a lot of arable land and a lot of people that require employment. The combination of low-cost labor, large availability of arable land, and a very generally a tropical nature of the climate gives us enormous competitive advantage that we need to enhance with science, as well as combination of both science and business. I think a lot of agriculture that takes place on the continent today is likely hobbyist type agriculture. People like to farm. People want to retire into farming. People think farming is fanciful and it's nice to have over the weekend. However, agriculture as a business on a scale that can compete with the rest of the world with enormous productivity, scientific and planned and mechanized and all year round is something that we need to move to. And that mentality is a cultural shift that I think we're just beginning to understand. In fact, the reality is that a lot of the so-called donor funds and international money that come into the continent continue to promote practices, to be honest to me, to be honest to you and I, as a practitioner in that sector, I call it poverty promoting policies, PPP. So a lot of poverty promoting policies continues in the sector where all the so-called smallholders and all of that stuff. No, the reality is that if you don't promote smallholder agriculture in your own continent, you come to Africa and you promote poverty agriculture. You need agriculture that is highly productive, agriculture that can feed the vast majority of our population.
Michael, can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
Okay. Sorry, maybe it might be a good idea for some people to maybe turn off their videos because it might be affecting the bandwidth that Michael suggested earlier. So maybe a few of us might do that. That might help because it seems to be affecting the connection. All right. So I think, Michael, you made a lot of good points, especially highlighting what some of the competitive advantages are. I like the point around human resources being our one of our biggest assets we have as a continent. So I think that's actually something we can harness. But that kind of takes me to the next question, which I have for you, Rose. So Michael did talk about agriculture as a whole. And I think there's a lot of emphasis around ensuring that we diversify our economy. So some countries which have been dependent on commodities like oil and what have you, right now, it's not a good look for them. So there's that whole argument, or there's that whole policymakers are speaking about we need to start diversifying our economies more, looking into what our core competencies are as nations. Rose, what are your thoughts on that?
Thank you, Ken. I agree with Michael on agriculture, and I think it's important that we diversify. It's important that we diversify our source of or what we do. We need to diversify, and I'd just like to give an example of historically how trade has been. Trade has been in Africa. Trade has been from Africa to the West, and trade has basically been from exportation of raw commodities. We, like for example, in Kenya, we export coffee, we export tea, we export flowers, but we are looking at it that most of what we export out of Africa is raw commodities. We don't add value. Like in Ghana, there's cocoa. And what happens is that you export these raw commodities at very low prices, but you in turn import coffee that has been added value. Kenyan coffee, you import it and buy it at very exorbitant prices. Ghanaian chocolates, chocolates that have been made by Ghana's cocoa, and that is when it comes back is very expensive. So in addition to diversifying our sources of revenue, we also need to look at looking at fair trade, looking at value addition for our products. Like our coffee, we shouldn't like have all our coffee going out there as raw materials. We can be able to add value. I visited South Africa sometime last year in October, and I went through Pick and Pay, and I couldn't see a single. I saw Lipton, tea. I saw tea from all over the world, but I never saw a single pack of Kenyan tea. Yet Kenyan tea is known to be the best in the world, and I think this it actually benchmarks on or it pivots on the points that as Africans we do not trade amongst each other, and I think research has been seen that trade between Africans, between African countries is around 16%. But when you look at Europe, trade amongst themselves is 70%. So you look at what we need in Kenya, we go and get it in Europe, as opposed to looking at Nigeria, going to get it from Uganda. So in addition to just diversifying our sectors, we also need to trade amongst each other. We need to increase inter-African trade. And one of the reasons why inter-African trade is so little is non-tariff barriers. And non-tariff barriers are basically impediments to trade. We have several government agencies intervening when you're exporting. There's corruption, there's infrastructure challenges, quite a number of challenges that are there that are preventing us from trading amongst each other. So in addition to that, to diversifying, we need to look at eliminating non-tariff barriers. We need to look at looking at how we can make agriculture more productive, not only subsistence agriculture. I think Michael was very right when he said we use agriculture as a hobby, and you will find most of the people want to go into farming when they are retired, when they are 60 years old. And when you're 60, you don't have the same energy when you're a young person. So it's important that we have a change of mentality as Africans, whereby we're looking at agriculture as business, as opposed to you're looking at agriculture as a subsistence or as a hobby. So mechanization of agriculture, encouraging young people to get into agriculture, ensuring that you're not subdividing land. You know, we have this culture in Africa whereby when you have 5 sons and you have 5 acres, you want to divide that 5 acres of land to those 5 sons. So if that one son, you know, if that 5 acres can be able to get you much more if you are to do one type of farming, as opposed to having now all your sons building 10 houses over there, and you know, you make that land useless at the end of the day. So also our policies, our farming policies, agriculture policies need to support us so that we can be able to capitalize and gain from agriculture. Thank you, Kenneth.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Rose. I think you yourself and Michael speakers. It's okay for you to have your videos, but I think we do have questions, the chain of thoughts. I will take those questions, in intervals. So I think the first question is coming from Luis. So Luis, if you want to unmute yourself and go ahead with your question, because I see you have a question. Luis Adongo.
Yes, thank you so much. I have 2 questions, and they can be answered by either of your speakers so far. One question is about the barriers to interjurisdictional trade around any legislation within countries, and what your thoughts are on that. And then one is just about the transportation and any of the infrastructure supports that inhibit the interjurisdictional trade within Africa. And then the second question is thinking of the people who would be working in those industries, what your thoughts are on social supports such as living wages or universal basic incomes or any of the other tools that would increase opportunities for the labor resources to work in these industries and that would make it competitive. Thank you.
All right, thank you for that. So for people who might be asking questions or perspectives, it would be okay to turn on your video so at least we can see your faces. I know Louis, so I think I know who she is, but just for the audience. So I'm not sure who wants to take a shot at this. Michael, are you still there? Do we lose you? Michael, can you hear me? Michael, did we lose you? Okay, so while we wait for Michael to reconnect, so maybe he has some issues. Rose, I was wondering, do you want to take a stab at that? Maybe the one on infrastructure gaps, because we talk about diversifying trade, we talk about promoting trade, but there's a lot of deficiencies in terms of infrastructure. So even if you want to convert to finished goods for export, if you don't have the basic infrastructure. Michael?
Yes, I'm connected. It might be better that you, because I'm trying to use my own direct audio.
Okay.
Bandwidth issues, but it's okay if you can hear me. Then we can continue with you.
Okay. So maybe you could have a stab at that, and then maybe Rose can speak about the other one around the living. Yes. So she was asking about some of the infrastructure gaps we have. How can what some of those things, they have the potentials of hindering any form of production capacity which we are looking to improve. So if you're talking about finishing products before you export them, rather than just sending them as raw materials for other people to finish it and then sell it back to you at exorbitant rates. So how do you think as a continent we can start looking into ways to address some of those gaps in infrastructure and whatever barriers that might be hindering more trade?
No, I mean, the issue of infrastructure, you can never have, even countries that have great infrastructure, they talk about building more infrastructure. So you can never have too much, and you can never say you have it all, or because you don't have infrastructure, you will not produce. I think the way we have to understand infrastructure infrastructure, and I speak also here as an engineer, is that it's almost like a self-perpetuating cycle. When you start investing in infrastructure, you start getting more productivity. When you have more productivity, then there's more demand for infrastructure and more funds available for it, and then you can do more infrastructure. There are ways to bridge your infrastructural gap where you don't have infrastructure and yet be able to manufacture. Singapore, Malaysia, even China and Vietnam, as well as Cambodia, all did these strategies of what they call special economic zones, which they developed in their countries in the 60s and 70s to ensure that they become competitive in manufacturing and processing. So what we should do is that all of those SCZs, SPZs, and all diseases that our government have set up and they have fancy policies around, it's about time we actually put them to work. First thing first is that these special economic zones, we basically have a concentration of infrastructure. You bring gas in there because you need gas for your furnaces, you need gas for your boilers, you need gas for your acid-base material for ammonia, nitrate, and the rest of the industrial process. You will throw in your grid, electric grid, and you ensure that there's 24/7 electricity in these special economic zones. You will ensure that there's water to ensure that you can set up living places as well as offices within these zones. You will link these places to broadband. You will bring in roads. You ensure that they have seaport access either by rail or directly via rivers as well as streams as well as ports that are connected to them. You will ensure that the overall infrastructure of that place, which is concentrated and doesn't have to be big, it could be anything from as little as 50 to 100 hectares, and you can put 500 of it in your country. You can start to 10 and see how it works, and then you build on that. So you do not have to fix the infrastructure for the entire country to be able to drag a country into the 21st century of manufacturing. To the contrary, it's actually an advantage that you don't have to spend that much capital on overall infrastructure in your country to be competitive. So there are strategies that are already available for you to be competitive despite the infrastructural gap. So I think that is not enough excuse for Africa, as it were. It's not enough excuse for Africa. It's not enough excuse for any country in the world that the reason why they are not competitive with manufacturing is because they just don't have any infrastructure and the money to build the infrastructure overnight. I think we need to start thinking about smart strategies, progressive elaboration, and quick wins, and have the mindset of winners. I mean, I think the first thing Africa needs, if you ask me, is self-confidence. We are the continent, after all, that built the pyramids. We are the continent that built the ruins of Zimbabwe. We are the continent that had the Great Kingdom. So unless we discover and rediscover our self-confidence, then we will not have the tenacity to be able to move forward. Ultimately, we must believe in ourselves when others believe in us. We must sell to ourselves, which is why the African Continental Free Trade Act is good. We must trade among ourselves. Why, for God's sake, less than 5% of trade among African countries, of all the trade that African countries execute, happens among African countries? We rather sell to people that are far distance and you have to take a lot of the logistics and cost to get to them. And then we will sell to ourselves and then we lose the advantage of intertrade and trading among ourselves. So Africa, first and foremost, needs to rediscover its self-confidence. And that self-confidence means that there's no challenge that is not an opportunity. The lack of infrastructure itself is an opportunity. To build infrastructure, if you ask me, you do not need dollars. Most of what you need, for example, in Nigeria. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Michael. Go on.
Yeah, most of those things you need to build infrastructure are local. You need cement. A lot of our continent is awash with limestone. You need asphalt. We have bitumen all over the continent. We need sand. We need concrete. These are things that you need to develop infrastructure. And we have a lot of it. So as a continent, when we realize that we already have all we need, including human capital, and that all we just need is to look inside ourselves and to build on what we have, then we will stop making excuses and then we'll get into action.
Michael, did we lose you?
Yes, that's it.
Okay. Thank you. That's great. I think you hit the nail on the head. We can't keep making excuses. So there are truly so many things we can do. Rather than just focus on the negatives around the deficit we have from an infrastructure standpoint. But Rose, I think you might want to tackle the next question because there's a lot of benefits, obviously, around the the part around the African and Continental Free Trade Agreement, which is supposed to help in terms of trading within countries in Africa. Even though there's a lot of arguments around that one too, because I think someone. Okay. I'm not sure who needs to mute themselves, but so I think there's that whole thing about I saw some data about how much it costs to move products from one part of Africa, and interesting, as it was actually more expensive than moving it from Africa to Europe. Interesting, there was some data I saw. I think I can't really remember the two countries, but I think some of it boils down to like what we've seen in the past. You have to go through so much, apart from the transportation cost, the whole barriers from and so many checkpoints and what have you. So, the question which Luis had around living wages of some more some of the workers who might be involved in terms of this whole trade thing. You're on, Rose.
Okay, thank you very much, Kenneth. I think that's a really good question because it squarely touches on the mandate of the Africa Continental Region. Can't you hear me? Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay. What I was saying is that it's a really good question because it touches on the mandate of the African Continental Free Trade Area. And one of the objectives of that agreement, which most of the countries have signed with the exception of Nigeria, is to actually gradually eliminate tariffs. And not only eliminate tariffs, eliminate non-tariff barriers. Currently, a lot of countries do not have agreements. Some countries do not fall into regional economic blocks, or even regional economic blocks do not have agreements with other regional economic blocks. So importing or exporting into other countries is very expensive. But with the elimination, with the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, we are going to see gradual elimination of the tariff. So it's going to be actually your products are going to be competitive when they're arriving in a foreign market. If you're exporting to Ghana from Kenya, the tariffs are going to be almost, I think the CFTA aims at reducing the tariffs by 90%. So your products are going to be competitive. Additionally, the CFTA looks at elimination of non-tariff barriers. So looking at what are issues apart from tariffs, what other issues are, what other technical barriers that are there that are preventing you from trading with another country? Could be the standards, the standards are not compatible. Could be the ingredients in a product you're not satisfied with it. Could be barriers in terms of even quotas. There are imposition of quotas that you can only export this amount or you can only import this amount. All those now with the Africa Continental Free Trade Area is probably going to come down a significant amount. And it is my belief that there's a target of increasing the 16% intra-African trade to around 51%. And with this increment, you're going to see a lot of job creation. You're going to see a lot of, with the competition amongst each other, because we're going to trade amongst each other. We're going to see efficiencies as a result of comparative advantage. And we're going to see, regions in Africa developing specializations in different products so that we are not ending up competing with each other for nothing, We can say East Africa will specialize in this. We can say Southern Africa is specialized in this. So we have, in addition to that, we have a single voice. For a long time, the Western world and Asia has been scrambling for Africa. And they have been approaching individual countries, trying to make trade deals. I think you're all aware that the US is trying to make a free trade deal with Kenya. And in my opinion, I think this is a derailer and an assault to the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. So it's important that as Africa, we speak as a single voice. And it's for me, it's my belief that the CFTA is that vehicle that will give us that single voice. When you're negotiating at the World Trade Organization, when you're negotiating as a single country, you have no voice. But when you go as 55 African countries, you can be able to influence the policies. You can be able to influence the decisions that are taking place there. So for me, it's really important that each and every country is very active in negotiations for this Africa Continental Free Trade Area. I know there are some countries who might feel that they are small and they might not be able to benefit much. There has been talk that it's only Nigeria, it's only Kenya, and South Africa are the ones who are going to benefit from this. But in my opinion, in how I've read the agreement, the benefits are going to be across the board. They probably will just take more time because the economies that are more open are the ones who are going to benefit the most. So it's important that countries start opening up their economies, sitting down to negotiate on these agreements, and with the agreements taking off and trading, we are hoping that trading will start on 1st of January of next year, and we'll have a new regime whereby Africans can be able to get their due in terms of trade. We will no longer be exploited, and we can be able to get our fair due. Thank you.
So thank you very much, Rose. The network has been a little bit tricky, but we'll still make it work. So I'd like to take some more questions or perspectives. So I can see Abongil in South Africa. Abongil, can you unmute yourself and go ahead with your question or contribution, please? Abongil, can you hear me? Okay, so while we wait for him to connect, we can just move to the next person on the who's raised their hand for questions. Tony, can you make your contribution, please?
Good day, Ken. Good day, everyone. I just wanted to contribute towards the question in regards to transportation and infrastructure. A lot of progress is being made in cross-border trading corridors. The Mombasa-Nairobi corridor, for example, is near completion. A lot of the other corridors, with even the Abidjan-Lagos corridor, which handles about 2/3 of West Africa trade, is basically near completion and being improved and getting better. So in regards to transportation infrastructure, I feel that Africa is getting to that point where it recognizes that it needs to put in a lot of capital into developing those infrastructure, and it is actually doing what it needs to. And being the fact that the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement is going to be coming into fruition pretty soon, so having access to all these trade corridors is paramount.
All right. Thank you very much, Tony. Yes, we can. I don't think that's arguable. Everyone understands. You made very good contribution. We know establishing those corridors and trying to utilize the benefits of the continental free trade agreements. It's something which we just have to keep striving towards reaping the benefits. But I think I would like to ask another question. So I'll probably start off with Michael on this one. So one of the key things we speak about a lot when we talk about African trade and promotion, especially post-COVID, would be the need for an inclusive economic growth model. So what does that look like? Some of the groups, you look at female entrepreneurs and young people. There are a lot of them who are actively involved in sectors ranging from ICT to agriculture, which you and I know that we can't speak about any form of development or progress without talking about these two sectors. So I'd like to start off with you, Michael. I'm now bringing you back to agriculture as well. So, but this has to do more with young entrepreneurs, because Africa, as you know, we have one of the youngest populations globally, and you spoke about human resources being one of our major assets. So now tying that into agriculture, what do you think are our prospects, and what should we be doing as a continent around supporting and encouraging young entrepreneurs in agriculture and maybe in the digital economy too?
Yeah, thank you very much, Ken. Both agriculture and technology are core to what I do. As well as the pioneer founder of Lofting Innovation Hub, which is a startup accelerator based in Lagos, Nigeria, as well as Abuja, and across the country. Someone who led the Happy Labs network of accelerators and the incubators in Africa for 2 years, which connects over 208 hubs across Africa, technology hubs, but also a practitioner in agriculture. So I understand how these two sectors are critical to our future in Africa. Before I tackle your question, perhaps I would like to mention what I call the post-COVID formula for in terms of sectors that I think will move the continent and our countries forward. 3 + 3 / 1. What do I mean by that? 3 basic necessary sectors, which are very critical for our survival. 3 sectors that will facilitate them, and 1 sector on which these 6 sectors are built. Let's start with the basic sectors. The 3 basic sectors: you need food, regardless whether we have COVID-19 or not, and you need to eat. So agriculture, agribusiness, food security related sector is going to be critical post COVID-19. Healthcare, you need help, whether it is seeking clinical intervention or preventive or pharmaceutical or nutritional. Healthcare is going to be a very hot sector post COVID-19. And you need physical security. This is often less discussed as a business, but it is a big business. One of the biggest sectors where across the world, either in Europe or in North America, is the defense and security industry. So these 3 sectors are basic necessities. I mean, you need to be secure, you need to have health, and you need to eat. So those 3 are what I call the 3 pillars, the 3 basic pillars. And then you have the 3 facilitating pillars. Number 1 there is infrastructure. You require infrastructure to be able to execute any of the 3 things I talked about. You also require technology. Technology is critical. It's a critical infrastructure in the 21st century. I mean, you cannot do without technology. And lastly, you require capital. So the financial sector is going to be very critical post-COVID-19 as well. So those are the 3 facilitating sectors. And this will be built on human capital development, education. You cannot do any of the 3 + 3 if you don't invest in your people. And this is where I want to use that to tackle the question that you've laid before us. Human capital development has to be the heart of what we do in terms of post-COVID-19 policies across African countries. You have to recognize, after all, that inclusion for us as a country is not a choice. As a continent, it's not a choice. We're a continent that is 75% young. We're a continent that has over about 50% of our population are women. So for us, being inclusive is a matter of economic survival. If 50% of our population are women are shut out of the economy, then we are performing less than we should perform. And the reality remains that even the future of the education of our children relies largely on our mothers and our daughters. So the education of the girls of African countries going forward. The girl child must be educated. The girl child means if we want to have any fighting chance whatsoever to be able to survive in this 21st century. We must ensure that all our children that are out of school, I think we have about 10 million of them in Nigeria, which is outbreak. These children were frittering away their future, and I continue to say it, that what is above our neck is going to be what is going to be more important than what is below. On the continent, we will be better off investing in our human capital and exporting it virtually, because now you don't have to put your human capital on ships the way we're enslaved for 200 years. In the 1700s to 1900s, or were colonized 100 years later from 1900 from the late 1800s to the mid 1900s. We don't need to do any of that, and we don't even need to have a brain drain getting on planes as we did since 1960 post-independence that have drained Africa of most of the brightest. With the world of virtualization, that you and I can sit across the world today, you are probably about 2,000, 3,000 miles away from where I am. And we can listen and hear each other. Africa can begin to export capital without that capital actually leaving Africa. We can become the data room, data center, and the live bank of the rest of the world. Because we can do that because Africans are brilliant. Africans can speak English, the vast majority of the continent, or speak French, or speak Arabic, which are the 3 international languages of businesses. Africans, if we educate them, have proven that they can hold their own anywhere in the world, be it in space program in NASA, where Nigerians, Kenyans, and South Africans continue to outperform. May I use the opportunity to remind everyone that Elon Musk was born on this continent after all, and he is now the one putting Americans in space. So if Elon Musk attended primary and secondary school in Africa, and it has not made him less capable to put human beings in space, then why should any of our African children settle for less? So we as a continent, if we invest in our girls, first and foremost, then we'll produce a lot of Elon Musk. We'll produce a lot of Dangote. We'll produce a lot of Jimovia. We'll produce a lot of smart people that will change the world that we live in today. So I think we are dropping the ball on human capital development if we don't invest in our girls. Our girls, I will say it again, I'll continue to say it. If we want to preserve the future of Africa, then we will emphasize the investment in the education of our girls and ensuring that girl education is priority across the continent. And then the future of African children will be assured.